Hi guys, Mrs. Sibinger here. I'm getting ready to start Chapter 6 of Monster Street. I don't eat meat. The man's deep, threatening voice made Max's and Jade's blood curdle. They slowly turned, knowing they had nowhere to hide. I said, "What are you doing here, Jade?" the stranger asked again, slamming his work shovel into the ground. He was clean-shaven and tall as a doorway, and his overall straps dripped over his shoulders like denim waterfalls. Jade stepped toward him defensively. "Dad, we were just walking and—" "I've told you to stay away from these woods. They're not safe," her father admonished. "And how many times have I told you not to talk to strangers?" He peered down at Max suspiciously. The farmer's eyes were the grayest Max had ever seen, grayer than a storm cloud. I'm sorry, Mr. Howler," Max apologized. "I'm staying next door with my Gramps and Grammy, and your daughter was just—" "You're a Blood Knight boy?" he interjected. Max nodded. Mr. Howler stared at him. "All the more reason to stay away from my daughter." He jabbed Max with his finger into his chest. "You keep on your side of the pumpkin patch, and we won't have any problems, understand?" He grabbed Jade's arm and began leading her across the field toward their house. She glanced back at Max, embarrassed, and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." At dinner that evening, Gramps and Grammy sat at the heads of the table, spooning food out of a half a dozen bowls and passing them around to Max. He stared down at his plate of juicy meat and couldn't help thinking about how that very meat had been walking around on the farm earlier that morning in the form of a living, breathing hog. It was the first time he had ever seen his food before it was butchered. "Ain't you going to eat, boy?" Gramps' gruff voice boomed from the other end of the table. I don't eat meat," Max confessed, wishing his mom had stayed for dinner to explain his dietary habits. "Don't eat meat?" Max asked. "I'm a vegetarian," Max said. Gramps laughed a hearty chuckle, but soon realized that Max wasn't joking. The old man leaned back in his chair and squinted at Max, sizing him up. "How are you supposed to grow right if you don't eat meat?" Gramps asked. "I get protein in other ways like cashews and protein shakes." Max stopped when he saw the incredulous look on Gramps' face. "We have mashed potatoes. We have green beans. In those bowls beside you," Grammy chimed in, trying to break the tension. "And by the way, did you have a nice look around the farm this afternoon?" Max wanted to ask Gramps and Grammy about everything that Jade had told him, the disappearance 12 years ago, if they had ever seen the man-wolf, and why everyone was so afraid of Eastern Forest, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up at all. I met the neighbors," Max said. "The girl next door and I went walking, and she said that—" Before Max could finish, my shirt's not working very good today, guys, sorry. Before Max could finish, Gramps sat his fork down and turned to Max. "Listen to me, Max. You need to stay away from those folks," Gramps chided. "You can't trust anyone around here. It's safer for all of us that way." "Yes, better safe on this side of the pumpkin patch," Grammy added. "Well, why?" Max asked. "Does it have something to do with the disappearances 12 years ago?" Gramps and Grammy exchanged a surprised look. They didn't say anything for a long moment. Then Grammy put her palm to her forehead and moaned, "Oh, darn migraines." She took a pill from a prescription bottle in her pocket, put it in her mouth, then glanced out the window toward the horizon. "It's past sunset," she said. "Gramps, don't forget to lock up the barn after dinner, and just in case, the moon should be coming up any minute now." Gramps glanced at the rifle case in the corner of the room. He then grunted as he tore a piece of meat with his teeth. Max thought it was a peculiar exchange, but didn't say anything. He assumed that locking the barn before nightfall was a normal chore on the farm, but something about it felt odd, like they were hiding something from him, something secret. What are they so afraid of during the full moon? Then he remembered the conversation with his mom earlier that day. Mom said that you had some things of my father's that you wanted to pass down to me, he said. And that's why I'm here, isn't it? Well, we're still working on getting it all together, Gramps replied. Yes, dear, but we want it to be a surprise, said Grammy. Later that night, Max lay in bed, watching a moth flutter against his hissing lantern on his nightstand. The cool night air swept through the screen, and his open window rustled the pages of a book resting on top of a nearby nightstand. The sounds of the night were unfamiliar to him. Crickets, cicadas, and owls and frogs. Back in the city, Max could only hear sirens and horns as he fell asleep every night. Soon he heard something stir outside. He sat up, looked out the window, and saw Gramps locking up the barn. A few minutes later, Max heard Gramps come back inside the cabin and start talking to Grammy. Quietly, Max climbed out of bed and cracked open his door. He saw Gramps and Grammy standing in the den below, their faces aglow with drowsy light from the candle Grammy held in her hand. He could faintly hear their voices. His mother said that he doesn't fit in at school, the old woman whispered. Said he seems lonely. His father was the same way, Gramps returned. Do you think it's too dangerous for him to be here? Grammy asked. I mean, he hasn't learned how to protect himself yet. Better here with us than anywhere else, Gramps said. We just need to keep him away from the forest and the neighbors. And everything will go as planned. Max heard them walk up the stairs toward their bedroom at the end of the hall. He pushed his ear harder against the door and heard Grammy's voice once again. You really think he's ready to know the truth about what happened to his pa in those woods? She asked. We don't have much of the choice now. The full moon will be at its peak on the third night, and the new beast will arrive. We have to make sure that Max is ready to protect himself. The talisman can only help so much, Gramps said. Then Max heard their bedroom door click shut. The new beast will arise, Max repeated in his mind, chilled by the words. Protect myself? And what talisman? A moon-scented breeze seeped through his window screen and rushed over him. He looked out toward the veiled forest. What happened to you in those woods, Dad? He murmured, uncomfortable. He unzipped his hoodie and tossed it onto a nearby chair. Silly hocus pocus, he scoffed, skeptical of what Gramps had said about the hoodie somehow being there to protect him. Max lifted the silver dagger from the nightstand and hid it in the top drawer. As soon as they go to sleep, I'm going to look around the house for answers, Max thought. If I can figure out what Grammy and Gramps were talking about, then maybe I can find out what happened to my dad. He watched the full moon peeking over the horizon. His mouth stretched into a yawn, and he lay back down and closed his eyes. Something in the night, he awoke to a ghastly howl just outside his window.